Are you feeling isolated lately? Well, if you live on planet Earth in 2024, there's a 25% chance that you are. 1 in 4 adults feels lonely right now. Today, we'll explore one of the most discussed topics of the year, loneliness. The loneliness epidemic, to be more precise. What caused it and how humans have found a solution for it. Greetings. Do not attempt to adjust your screen. There is nothing wrong. We have taken control as to bring you news from the future, and we will return to you after this message. I'm Virginia Trujillo, and you are watching Uzuke.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
After the end of the world. Don't you know that yet? It's after the end of the world. Don't you know that yet? It's after the end of the world. Don't you know that yet? It's after the end of the world. Don't you know that yet? It's after the end of the world. Don't you know that yet? It's after the end of the world. Don't you know that yet? It's after the end of the world.
In 2024, never have people been so connected, and yet never have they been lonely. A study in 142 countries from Gallup and Meta revealed that more than 1 billion people felt lonely. And yes, you heard me right. Meta, the parent company of the ancient social media platforms Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, was researching loneliness, a problem that their products were supposed to solve. Maybe that's why they're in the past. Why, you may ask? We'll explore that in a second. Research found that loneliness wasn't just affecting the elderly anymore. Surprisingly, young adults aged 19 to 29 were the loneliest, followed by those aged 30 to 44. On the other hand, people aged 65 and older were the least lonely. 57% of them said they were not lonely at all. So, what has caused this general loneliness? Here are the main reasons. The first one is convenience. In 2024, technology made life extremely convenient. With the click of a button, anything from food to furniture could be delivered to people. Many of them worked, studied, even exercised from home. Instead of meeting in person, they used archaic forms of virtual communication, like a less advanced form of telepathy called texting, and the now abolished following. In 2024, people could go days, even months, without leaving the house. As a consequence, they met less and less in person, which damaged, of course, their ability to maintain and create friendships. This trend was worse in big cities, and they could access those services 24/7. And so people in rural areas actually felt less lonely. Secondly, social media. Although the first apps were created to connect people to their friends and family, they have evolved into something that made people lonely. Many humans used to spend hours watching other people's lives on social media instead of living their own, which led to comparisons, of course, low self-esteem, and reduced their will to do things in person. Ironically, the more people use social media searching for human connection, the lonelier they felt. And thirdly, there was the COVID-19 pandemic. Loneliness was not something new when COVID lockdowns happened, but they definitely accelerated the trend. In 1990, 3% of US adults did not have any close friends. In 2021, that number went up to 12%. And was not only isolated to the United States. In 2021 as well, Brazil, Turkey, and India were ranked the 3 loneliest countries in the world. COVID-related isolation was compared to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of health damage. It increased the chances of having mental health issues, heart disease, and premature death. If you wonder why isolation is considered a form of punishment in prison, there's your answer. And lastly, but not least, there was the news coverage of the time. Being home alone at the time made people follow more of what was happening in the world, and journalists were not particularly known for bringing the most uplifting stories. In those years, terms like doom scrolling and headline anxiety became popular. As we know now in 2071, constant exposure to negative news can lead to depression and PTSD. Being bombarded with news about death, disease, conflict, and crime does not particularly encourage people to go for a walk outside. Now, for you, watching this in 2024, I come with good news from the future. Humans have found a solution for that crisis. But first, we need to understand the difference between loneliness and social isolation, not the same. Social isolation is the lack of social contacts, or having few people to interact with. Loneliness, on the other hand, is the feeling of being alone, regardless of the amount of people in your social circles. People can be alone and not feel lonely at all. And in the same way, someone can feel lonely while being surrounded by people. So how did they manage to combat the loneliness epidemic with so many people being socially isolated? Well, here's the solution that ended the 2024 loneliness epidemic. First one, people disconnected. Ironically, the first step to feeling more connected was to disconnect from their phones and to engage with the real world. Taking social media breaks between 1 to 7 days improves people's moods, productivity, sleep, and reduce their anxiety. Also, reducing the exposure to news to explore hobbies, exercise, or practice outdoor activities decrease their levels of stress. Of course, negative news, not positive ones. By replacing the hours spent in front of a screen with activities that stimulate the brain, like learning something new, engaging in a hobby, or even walking, they were able to reduce their loneliness up to 30%. And number two, they increased their weak interactions. Seeking support from friends and family is very important, but many people lack that support system. And Dr. Gillian Sandstrom, a psychology professor at the University of Sussex, found a solution. She discovered that weak ties could significantly improve mental health, reduce loneliness, and increase the levels of happiness. But what exactly is a weak tie interaction? From saying hi to a neighbor or good morning to the barista of the coffee shop, to engaging in small talk with a stranger. Something that most humans used to do naturally, but lost the ability over time. And the major reason they stopped talking to strangers was fear. Here's Dr. Gillian explaining it.
Now, not having to talk to these people might seem like a good thing, right? For those of us who are socially anxious, which probably includes many people sitting in this room, but when you don't have these minimal social interactions, your social skills get a little rusty. And then it's like a tiny step from there to thinking, maybe I don't have any social skills. And then another small step to thinking, maybe everybody can see that I don't have any social skills and they don't like me. And then one more baby step to thinking, I'm just going to avoid these social interactions altogether. And then what we have is a loneliness epidemic. More importantly, I want you to know that these fears are completely overblown. So time after time and study after study, I've asked people to predict what will happen when they talk to a stranger. Then I actually make them talk to a stranger and report back on how it's gone. And consistently, people say that it didn't go just a little better than they thought. It went a lot better than they thought. And all those things that they worried about didn't really happen.
Weak ties increase the sensation of being a member of a community, which is essential to our well-being. According to her, the key to achieving the best results was consistency. Here she explains her method.
And so I thought for a really long time, how can I help people see that this pattern is generally positive. And I concluded that I had to get people to talk to lots of strangers in a short period of time. But how the heck am I going to do that when people don't want to talk to even one stranger? And so eventually I came up with the idea of creating a talking to strangers scavenger hunt game, which people played on their phone. And so every day, participants had to carry out at least one mission that involved talking to someone who matched a description, like someone wearing a hat or someone drinking a coffee. And after playing the game and talking to strangers for a week, people felt more confident in their conversational abilities and less worried about being rejected, which, by the way, happens a lot less often than you might think. Now, these changes occur gradually over the course of time, and so the takeaway here is that practice really does make perfect.
Since leaving the house was essential to solve this issue, people gradually started to do it again. With time, it also became clear why the elderly were better equipped to deal with this epidemic, as most of them did not rely completely on the internet to live their lives. A very wise decision. In fact, the ancestral wisdom of grandmothers was transformed into a technology by Dr. Dixon Chibanda, a psychiatry professor at the University of Zimbabwe, who founded a new form of community therapy named the Friendship Bench in 2006.
The Friendship Bench essentially is a model that consists of three key components: grandmothers, basic cognitive behavioral therapy, and community support groups. We identify suitable trainers in communities who we then train. Those trainers then go into that community and train grandmothers. The trained grandmothers are then allocated a wooden park bench in their community. We then facilitate referrals to the grandmothers who work from these wooden park benches. After up to 6 sessions, clients or patients are then referred to join a community support group. I think one of the main achievements of Friendship Bench is we have managed to destigmatize mental health. And I think that has happened because of the approach that we use, which is very non-traditional in terms of the way mental health services are provided. The language that we use in Friendship Bench is non-clinical. We use language that the community resonates with. For instance, we won't talk about depression or anxiety, but we'll talk about kufungisisa, which literally means thinking too much. We talk about kusimudzira, which literally means to uplift. We talk about kuvura pfungwa, opening up the mind, and kusimbisa, to strengthen. And these are words that the community can resonate with. We've taken away the clinical component, by using language which is culturally appropriate, although we are offering a clinical service. And I think this has been one of the greatest impact of Friendship and just, destigmatizing the whole thing and giving mental health a human face.
I welcome you at this Friendship Bench, where we help each other by talking. If you want to cry, you can cry. Here, you are free to tell all what is troubling you.
It saved my life to begin with. Like I would have been dead by now. Secondly, I've learned to accept life as it is. These women, they are old and wise, and they have got past experiences in life. And I don't know, there is this magic about the old women, I get along very well with them.
I'm now a changed man. Since it begins with me, so the change also begins with me. I'm living the change.
With the positive results, the Friendship Bench was expanded into other countries. In 2024, the grandmother-based therapy was being applied in Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zanzibar, Vietnam, Kenya, Jordan, the USA, and the UK. Now, to our viewers in 2024, I will probably contradict your parents' advice on this one, but how about you give it a try and talk to a stranger this week? Maybe someone older than you. Science is on their side. Thanks for watching, Uzuke. Every week, I'll bring you stories that connect you to the future and the people around you. See you next week.
Happiness.